Hi Year 10. So I'm just trying a quick little video on one of the Macbeth quotes that I've given you for Friday's task. I'm hoping to just keep it short and just talk you through the quote just to give you a few extra ideas to add to your notes. So the quote that we're looking at on the Firefly task is this one, look. With his brandished steel which smoked with bloody execution, which then goes to till he enseamed him from his knave to his chops. So this is from Act 1, Scene 2. So in Act 1, Scene 2, the captain is describing to Duncan, remember the king, Macbeth and Banquo's actions at war. So the Scottish army have been in a battle against the Norwegian army and also the rebel MacDonald's army as well. And Macbeth in particular, in this section we see his real kind of warrior kind of status and his fighting calibre really detailed here. And the king is really impressed by Macbeth's actions. So this quote here is said about Macbeth. Remember, we aren't introduced to Macbeth until the next scene. So we hear about him before we see him. So his, I suppose, sense of person and who he is. He's well known. So this, as I said, is the captain talking about Macbeth. Look, so with his brandished steel, which smoked with bloody execution. Okay, so as we can see here, I've defined brandished for you. So it's to wave or flourish something, especially a weapon. So here it is a weapon. It's referring to the steel. So here the steel is a sword. Again, could be metaphorical if we think about why the qualities of steel, what it would be like to hold, how it would feel in your hands, what harm it could cause. Think about why Shakespeare uses the noun steel rather than the noun sword. And the other word which I particularly want you to, so I'm just going to highlight steel. The other word which I particularly want you to think about is this idea of smoked. Okay, so if we look at here, what is it that's smoking? Well, it's the sword. The steel is smoking. Not a cigarette, obviously, but steam related. So what is being suggested there? How is the sword being used if it's generating smoke? Potentially it's being overworked, which perhaps shows Macbeth being ruthless as a killer. Almost elements of machine-like kind of imagery there. Perhaps this idea of Macbeth himself being a machine. So, you know, as a fighter, as a warrior, he is machine-like. So then there's a little bit that I've missed out of the quote. It just talks in between about... So it's for brave Macbeth, well, he deserves that name, disdaining fortune with his brandished steel, which smoked bloody execution like Valor's minion, so kind of like bravery's loyal follower, carved out his passage, till he faced the slave, which never shook hands nor bade him farewell, till he enseamed him from the knave to the chops. So this second bit here is talking about, again, it's Macbeth, he, unseamed, him, but him is the enemy here. And a seam, if you have a look at perhaps what you're wearing or any item of clothing, a seam is a line where two pieces of fabric are sewn together in a garment and other article. So here, is it talking about clothing? It's not. So we've got this use of this metaphor. What is unseamed? So if we think of knave, so navel being your tummy, and your chops being up to your head. Here we see that the metaphor is that almost Macbeth takes apart this man. Okay. And he acts as a tailor would. So the use of the unseaming is to unpick. So a tailor would unpick fabric, would unpick the stitches to remove the fabric into two separate pieces. So here we've got a suggestion that Macbeth is almost skilled with his fighting prowess, that he is experienced in, I suppose, weaponry and skillful at battling. I suppose the other thing as well is this idea of, by using the verb unseamed, there's almost a suggestion that Macbeth doesn't see his enemy as a human, almost a piece of clothing and maybe a piece of meat. So this is quite interesting because this is the first kind of mention really that we have of Macbeth as a man, as a soldier, and we get a really strong impression here of a ruthless warrior, but with a purpose here, because remember, he is fighting for his king and country, and we need to hold on to this idea because there's often a lot of discussion around Macbeth being kind of an innocent man and Lady Macbeth influencing him and changing him, but let's not take anything away from Macbeth here. If we look at how he fights, his weapon is smoking with the actions of his kind of killing. And again, this here almost has kind of painful suffering to it. It's not a quick kill. He's not killing to then move on. Here it's purposefully kind of painful for the victim.